The fallacy that fighting Brazilian factions through international coalitions undermines national sovereignty does not hold up in the face of the reality experienced by the population.
The story we're about to tell seems hard to believe, like something out of a mystery movie. You know when all of a sudden the entire population of a city disappears? Reality is much stronger and has a much greater impact than fiction.
For decades, entire communities have been forced to live under rules imposed by criminals who take over houses, expel families, and even choose young women to be their lovers without the parents being able to do anything about it.
Let's go now to Rio de Janeiro because a 22-year-old young woman was killed because she allegedly refused to go out with a drug dealer.
This is truly a violation of sovereignty. This is truly narco-terrorism. This is truly cowardice at its highest level. When factions establish parallel authority, they take away from the state the legitimate monopoly of force and law, creating a system of terror that destroys the lives of thousands of Brazilians. Several countries have already understood this threat and signed the military agreement that forms the shield of the Americas.
Starting today at 11 p.m., the curfew begins.
The results are clear. Arrests of faction leaders, recovery of illicit money, and shutting down criminal activities that sustain the parallel power. If there had been any violation of sovereignty, countries like Paraguay, Ecuador, and Argentina would be contesting these actions. On the contrary, the population of these countries has been showing support and is already reaping the benefits of this collective fight, showing that the narrative of violation is just a smokescreen. If Brazil wastes the opportunity to confront organized crime now, it will be giving up military resources, advanced technology, and high-capacity military support offered by the United States. But after all, who really benefits from the continuation of violence in the country? Welcome to Vida no Quartel.
Soraya, it's interesting to see the minister's statement, isn't it? Saying that, no, look, these criminal organizations, they're not terrorists because their motivation is to make money. And then you think about this. Those grotesque figures from Hamas, are they terrorists or not? What they did in Israel cannot be considered an act of terrorism. Because if you look at what happens inside the Brazilian favelas, you'll see a very strong similarity. People with rifles in their hands who stay there ready to do harm, to defend their territory, to make sure that in that territory, the law that counts is the one they impose, not the law of the country. And then comes this concern like Brazilian sovereignty. Where is Brazilian sovereignty in these territories?
The advance of the United States Southern Command, which in just 3 days carried out simultaneous attacks on vessels and drug trafficking infrastructure, put the Palácio do Planalto on high alert. In response, the Brazilian president sent a delegation of allied congressmen to join the Democratic opposition in the United States in an attempt to discredit the classification of the factions as narco-terrorists. The political maneuver could be the trigger for the Pentagon to receive authorization to directly attack the structures of the PCC in command over Melo. No decent Brazilian wants to see their country invaded by foreign forces to take power, and that's not what's at stake. Because the United States is not threatening the Brazilian state or nation, but rather the drug traffickers who terrorize all of the Americas.
Residents of Wuraponga in the rural area of Morada Nova in the interior of Queira abandoned the region after receiving threats from organized crime in a dispute between two leaders that spread fear throughout the city.
Opening. The school, the businesses, and even the health clinic closed, and practically all the families moved to neighboring towns, and now the atmosphere is like a ghost town. Opening.
Even though they have to live in territories under control, with a total absence of the state, citizens are still forced to pay high taxes and finance it. An inefficient state that spends huge amounts of money to give politicians a good life, instead of strengthening the security forces. Opening. International support to mitigate these organizations is very different from opening the doors to an invasion. U.S. troops have already been allies in numerous joint operations with Brazil, and this cooperation has always brought positive results. Accepting that the PCC and Comando Vermelho continue expanding their businesses, creating fintechs, gas stations, dominating entire neighborhoods, and even electing political representatives, is to officially declare Brazil a narco-state.
For the faction, what matters is territory, territory, and territory. Selling marijuana and cocaine, that's nothing.
It's a very high cost. It was a very risky logistics, bringing it here to Rio de Janeiro. Nobody produces drugs here. Where does the drug usually come from? Marijuana comes from Paraguay. Cocaine comes from Bolivia and Colombia. Now through this route that comes through the Amazon, and it ends up arriving here.
Opening, the U.S. Joint Force delivered synchronized and layered effects.
I mean, these are the capabilities that are identifying the rocket launches.
Opening.
The Shield of the Americas shows that it is possible to fight organized crime effectively, as in the case of Ecuador, which leads in arrests and has significantly reduced violence. Opening. This is only possible with an integrated Continental coalition, since the factions operate with branches in several countries. Opening. Southern Command has military capabilities that go far beyond imagination. Southern Command has capabilities. Amphibious landing training, airdrops of vehicles, and joint operations show that any parallel power is no match for a state offensive. This American military force, combined with advanced monitoring technology, can quickly neutralize criminal structures. Brazil could benefit from this capability if there were political will to cooperate, if there were interest. Together with the FBI, ABIN, with the CIA and the armed forces in joint operations, if borders. State police would have access to modern weapons, real-time monitoring, opening second good. State police would have access to modern weapons, real-time monitoring, and operational support.
Second good. Where is the Navy? 90% of the cocaine that leaves by sea. Where is the Navy? What is the role of the Brazilian Navy patrolling to deliver this to Brazil?
This integration would take the fight against crime to a new level, without any harm to national sovereignty. Instead, the current Brazilian government is fighting hard to remove the definition of narco-terrorists from the factions, when it should be putting the same effort into uniting national forces and seeking alliances with friendly nations. Brazil has been sending military personnel on UN peacekeeping missions for decades, and there has never been any questioning about violations of sovereignty in these cases, even though Brazilian forces have arrested insurgents and fired shots. This shows that the logic of political polarization distorts common sense, causing similar facts to be judged by double standards. If the United States arrested the leader of a Brazilian faction, the current government would probably declare that Brazil had been invaded, when it should actually celebrate and support the action of neutralizing another enemy of the nation. The example of El Salvador is emblematic in this context. In 2015, El Salvador was considered the most violent country in the world. Today, it holds the position of the safest nation in the Americas, even with its president Nayib Bukele offering spots in its prisons for criminals from other countries. This was only possible because there was political courage to confront the gangs without making any concessions. Brazil could follow a similar path if there weren't criminal tentacles in all branches of government. That's why aligning with the Continental Offensive and providing resources so that the gangs can be effectively fought would bring benefits, not only to the population, but also to the police officers who face a real war of attrition every day, where lives are lost. What is this? What is this? Brazilian police officers live in a situation like drying ice, where the effort to make arrests is constantly neutralized by inexplicable habeas corpus decisions that put criminals back on the streets.
The leaders of the largest criminal faction in the country will be released. Known as André Durap, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for international drug trafficking and received a habeas corpus from the Supreme Federal Court.
Therefore, when it is said that the fight against the PCC and the Comando Vermelho carried out by the United States would violate Brazil's sovereignty, it is necessary to ask, wouldn't a parallel power operating within the country, dominating vast areas and dictating rules, also be a violation of sovereignty? Leave your answer to this question in the comments and tell us who benefits from the continuation of violence in the country. But take advantage of the free shipping promotion while it lasts. Here at Vida No Cuartel, you stay up to date with everything happening in the military world. Leave your like, subscribe, and watch one of the videos that's appearing on your screen. Forward fighters, see you next time.